A real nightmare, the Amityville murders and the haunted house. The horror of Amityville began on the evening of November 13, 1974. The small, quiet town of Amityville, New York, was forever changed when 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr. burst into a local bar, frantic and wild-eyed. He screamed that his family had been shot. When authorities rushed to his home at 112 Ocean Avenue, what they found was beyond comprehension: the bodies of 6 family members, each shot in their beds, lying in neat rows. His parents, Ronald Sr. and Louise, as well as his 4 younger siblings, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew, had all been murdered in cold blood. Authorities were baffled. The killings were methodical and brutal. Even more disturbingly, none of the family members appeared to have woken up during the massacre. They were found face down, as though they had been in a deep, unbroken sleep. How could one man have killed 6 people, one after another, without anyone fighting back or even stirring from their sleep? Rumors of dark forces began swirling almost immediately. The murders and the mystery. Initially, Ronald claimed his family had been murdered by a hitman. But the story quickly fell apart. Eventually, he confessed, but with a chilling twist. Ronald claimed that voices in the house had driven him to commit the murders, whispering and taunting him in the dead of night. These voices, he insisted, told him his family was conspiring against him and needed to be silenced. Whether it was his mental state or a sinister influence, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was eventually convicted of the murders, but the mystery surrounding the house was far from over. The Lutz family moves in. Just over a year later, George and Kathy Lutz purchased the house at a bargain price, well aware of the tragedy that had taken place there. Still, they couldn't resist the deal: a spacious Dutch colonial-style home in a desirable neighborhood, perfect for their family. They moved in with their 3 children and began what they hoped would be a new chapter. But the house had other plans for them. From the very first night, the family felt an unsettling presence. Doors would open and close on their own. The walls seemed to shift and groan, as though the house itself was alive. George Lutz, who had always been calm and rational, began experiencing a profound shift in behavior. He would become inexplicably angry, sometimes lashing out without reason. Soon, he found himself waking up every night at precisely 3:15 a.m., the exact time the DeFeo murders had occurred. Jody, the demonic entity. Their young daughter, Missy, began speaking of an imaginary friend she called Jody, who she described as a pig-like creature with red, glowing eyes. One evening, while tucking Missy into bed, Kathy glanced out her daughter's window and saw 2 red eyes staring back at her from the darkness. But when she rushed outside, there was nothing there. Just the feeling of something watching, something lurking beyond the glow of the streetlights. As time went on, the presence in the house became more menacing. The family reported an overwhelming stench of decay that would move from room to room. Cold spots would appear in random parts of the house, even on hot summer days. Kathy claimed she was levitated from her bed and hurled across the room by an unseen force. The children began having terrible nightmares, crying out in their sleep, their screams echoing down the dark, narrow hallways. Descent into madness. The toll on George's mind was relentless. He became obsessed with the house, convinced that it held some dark, ancient evil. He pored over old records, trying to uncover the house's history. What he discovered was chilling. The house was built on land that had once belonged to the Shinnecock Indians, who considered it a place of suffering and despair. Worse still, it was rumored that a Satanist named John Ketchum had once lived on the land and practiced dark rituals. George became consumed by this knowledge, spiraling deeper into paranoia and anger, as though the house itself was drawing him into its twisted history. One night, while checking the basement, George saw what appeared to be a hidden room, its walls painted red, seemingly stained with blood. He had never seen this room before. It wasn't part of the house's blueprints. Known now as the Red Room, it was thought to be a portal, or perhaps an altar for the dark rituals once practiced on the land. The final night. The family held on for 28 days before the house's influence became too much. On their final night, the entities in the home unleashed a horrifying barrage. Doors slammed shut, voices screamed through the walls, and the entire house seemed to shake with a furious energy. Shadows darted across the hallways, and the smell of rot became overpowering. Terrified, the Lutz family fled in the middle of the night, leaving everything behind, never to return. The aftermath. Their story became a media sensation, drawing paranormal investigators from across the country. Ed and Lorraine Warren, famed demonologists, visited the home and confirmed that it harbored a malevolent presence. But despite their findings, skepticism grew. Some accused the Lutz family of fabricating the story for publicity or profit. Others believed it was simply a haunting that had gotten out of hand. Its legends spun bigger over time. Still, to this day, those who have visited the house report feelings of dread and unease. Neighbors claim to see shadows in the windows at night, though the house now stands empty. Many say the evil within was never exorcised but merely lies dormant, waiting for the next family bold enough to call it home. The story of the Amityville house lives on, a chilling reminder that some places are marked by more than just tragic events. They carry a darkness that clings to their walls, waiting, lurking, watching. And if you ever find yourself near Ocean Avenue, you may feel its gaze, inviting you in, if only for a moment.